have a dynamite presentation from Matt Hunter on permaculture, and this man is quite an expert. He is active in the permaculture community here locally, the Orlando Permaculture Group, I guess that's what you called it. And then he's also just been hired by St. Cloud, their urban agriculture program. He's going to tell us more about that. Please welcome Matt Hunter. Come on.
Hello. So yeah, I'm going to be talking about permaculture. It's a pleasure to be up here and talk about something that I'm extremely passionate about. Has anyone here not heard of permaculture before at all? A single person. Wow, that's excellent. That's really good. All right. How many people have heard the word permaculture, but they're not really sure what it is? I don't believe this one doesn't know about permaculture, but I'm going to assume there's a few out there. All right, and then, okay, so how many people have personal hands-on experience or have taken some sort of class or something on permaculture? Let's see that. Okay, so yeah, these people, actually put your hands up, because these are good people to talk to afterwards if you're interested in it or want to hear some things about it beyond this, or learn how you can be more active in the permaculture community. We have a pretty nice growing permaculture community around here. So yeah, look forward to talk to those people or talk to myself, Nelson. So, all right, so permaculture is a design approach. That's kind of what I've come to describe it as. It's an ecological design approach. And at the core of it, the philosophy is meeting human needs, but also meeting ecological needs in the design of a food-producing ecosystem. So we want to foster the ecosystem health along with providing our food. And that's the immediate ecosystem that we're designing, which would be the little food forest in our backyard that we're eating out of. But it also takes into consideration the larger scale global ecosystem. And I'll get into more about this. I just want to give some kind of base understanding, because it can be pretty confusing of what permaculture is. People have a lot of confusion on that. I know I did. Well, first, my background, I learned about permaculture probably about 2.5 years ago. I went to an event with, some of you know Richard Powell. He's not around right now, but he started the Orlando Center of Urban Permaculture, which is a very hard thing to say, which turned into Orlando Permaculture. He's traveling, but the grand opening of that, which was on Permaculture Day, I got introduced to it. Shortly after, I took a permaculture design course with Richard and Marcus, another guy from, he started Permaculture Miami. And I just started getting more and more involved. I really just kind of fell in love with it. I ended up quitting my job a few months later at the beginning of 2014. I traveled around. I stayed on some homesteads, some permaculture farms. I took a month-long internship, another month-long work exchange thing on a farm. I've taken some other intensives and things like that. Most recently, after I got back from the trip, worked with a few other people in the community, and we started up the Orlando Permaculture Group, which has been going very strong and is doing some pretty exciting stuff, in my opinion, right now. And it looks like it's also growing, and I have the utmost hopes that it's gonna make some impacts as far as food production locally in our community and making that an effective thing that gets out to people and all that. So that's that. Yeah, so we're gonna jump right into permaculture. I'll try to describe it as much as possible. There's a lot of different components to it. So I kind of just picked out the things that I really think are just fun to talk about and important little things to know. So one of the things I really like to talk about is the natural versus agriculture spectrum. This kind of gives to me, this is the best way to give a broad understanding of where permaculture falls on the food production spectrum. On one side, you have a natural ecosystem, which is something that grows naturally. Nobody touches it, nobody fertilizes it, nobody waters it. On the other side, you have a monoculture, food-producing human ecosystem. So there's a few, obviously, major differences between these. But on both sides of the spectrum, we have different things that fall at different points. Biological diversity. Monoculture essentially has a few different, has some weeds popping up, but mainly one species. A natural system is, biological diversity falls very far on the natural side, very minimal on the agriculture side. Stability of the system and resiliency of the system. On the natural side, you're talking about pretty much the highest stability and resiliency you can have. On the agricultural side, if you stop running the irrigation, the whole thing's going to die. If a giant hailstorm comes through, the whole thing's going to die. If army worms come through and you have a whole bunch of squash or pumpkins, the whole thing's going to die if you don't manage it. So the resiliency is very minimal. It would take a large disaster to crash the natural system. So resiliency is highly compromised with a conventional agriculture system. External energy inputs. The natural system runs off of sunlight, 1 day's worth of sunlight. The agricultural system, energy inputs, fossil fuels, manpower, management, labor of harvesting, things like that are extremely high. Pollution, zero pollution. Everything is recycled, everything's taken up, everything's put back down. We have CO2 emissions. We have fertilizer runoff that goes into the waters, adds nitrogen to the aquifer and the underground water systems. It goes into the lakes. How's algae blooms? That's a major pollution factor that hopefully most people know about at this point. So the two things that make the monoculture agriculture food producing systems widely popular and used are the yields of human consumable foods that they produce. If you were to try to live off of a natural forest, you're going to be scavenging around 5 or 6 acres and hopefully shooting a squirrel, and you're not going to be living really high standard of life. But if you are producing food with a monoculture agriculture system, you're feeding a lot of people. The second thing is ease of harvesting. You can't go in there with a tractor and pull some chestnuts off of those trees and then break the tips off the smilax and eat them, and dig up some roots and eat the roots. You can't. You're compromising the ease of harvesting in a natural system. So all those things in mind, this is kind of just a way to understand where we're coming from. So with permaculture, we're generally looking at a natural system, and we're trying to emulate the things that we like, and we're trying to optimize the food production and the ease of harvesting and different things. And different permaculture designs fall into different different points on the spectrum, depending on what your goals of your system are, what your resources are, things like that. So, in terms of that, your production goals. All right, so if you're looking for a few sweet potatoes and you want some different fruit and some beans and a few avocados every day and some oranges, and these are some loquat leaves, it looks like, and chaya, some Bidens. This is Biden's alba, just different things that you make teas and different things out of. Logs, you're going to get some logs and things like that. If you're looking for this sort of yield, a very natural system is going to be very close to what you're looking for. But if you're looking for large crates of blueberries, truckloads of oranges, if you're looking to sell at markets on a larger scale, natural system may not be your best choice. So you have to consider harvesting. The application of the system that you're trying to design, you have to think of what community you're trying to serve. If you're growing food for your family, it's after I learned about permaculture design approach, I kind of laughed at the way that we grow food a lot of times, because we emulate monoculture agriculture system in our homes when it doesn't really make a lot of sense. We end up with a whole row of cauliflower at one time, and we have nothing to do with it. When at a natural system where you can have polycultures and different levels of growth and different perennial plants, you can end up with a large diversity of things in a small plot. The more you get towards the natural side of the spectrum, the more it's going to be suited to communities. I would say schoolyard gardens, intentional community type setups, or some sort of progressive communities that could come up in the future where the central part would be a food-producing ecosystem where people can harvest it. You need a lot of people engaged with the system and harvesting the system if you're getting towards the natural spectrum. If you're trying to do everything yourself and you have a tractor, there's compromises you're going to have to make when trying to emulate natural systems. Okay, yeah. And you can also have different systems on different points of your property. The permaculture zones, they're commonly referred to, are 1 through 5. And in zone 1, you have an intensively managed system. That's the other thing. A natural system, unmanaged. Monoculture, agriculture system, intensively managed. So you want your more intensively managed stuff closer to the house because, I personally don't want to go without cucumbers. I don't want to go without the kale. I want those things. So those can be up by your house. And then as you get out further, you can have less managed systems. And then as you get out, all the way out, you can have large-scale evolving dynamic ecosystems with overstory trees and different shrubs and different things like that. They can even be grazed by different sorts of animals, sheep, pygmy goats, or any chickens or geese, or there's grass-eating geese that only eat the grass. Like, there's a lot of different options when it comes to things you can put into your system, but different levels for different areas of the yard that you're looking for. All right, so these are just going to be some quick examples of points on the spectrum. We have what we normally talk about a lot here at Simple Living, which is organic growing of annual vegetables. Well, I shouldn't say that. Organic growing in general. There's a lot of perennial vegetables that people here use. So as Steve pointed out earlier, the term organic also has a huge variation. But the way I'm going to use it here is mimicking natural systems more so than we would in a system where we just dump water-soluble fertilizer that's been mined from the other side of the country, trucked over by fossil fuels, put into solid form, rains on it, turns into liquid, and it flushes through and essentially feeds the plants. Some of it disappears. As we move into organic, we're emulating the systems a little bit more. We're taking a system that naturally occurs in nature, which is decomposition, and we're taking plant matter, leaf matter, whatever we have, composting it in a separate outside of the garden, and then we're bringing it into the system. So we're mimicking components of the system, but integrating them into our pretty conventional design garden. So that's more towards the left side. Then as we move to the right, we have alley cropping. This is an agroforestry practice that has been around for a long, long, long time. But agroforestry, I'm not sure when it has invented, but it's been around for a good while. And these are different types of systems. What you'll generally see is rows of trees with annual vegetables grown in between them. And that's essentially so that they can optimize the use of their land while waiting 12 years for the pecans to grow. Or even after the pecans grow, they can still optimize the use of their land. But there are new evolving thoughts around designing alley cropping systems, which include more direct mimicry of natural systems, which is having rows of chop and drop or nutrient accumulating plants that are essentially just cycling nutrients, and you're using them to mulch the soils. That is a more broad mimicry of a natural system. We're doing composting, but we're composting in place, and we're integrating the things that we're composting to feed our plants into the system itself rather than bringing it in. And there's all kinds of different things. This is moringa, and it has annual vegetables. I don't know if you can barely see, it looks like cabbage or something, planted in between there. So you can harvest the moringa. If there's extra, you can tell that they coppice it off. Moringa can be a really tall tree. So they coppice it off and mulch it into the beds. Moringa is an extremely nutrient-dense plant that everybody's really hyped about now for good reason. But all those nutrients are also good for the plants. So it grows vigorously like a weed. You can chop it into the garden. This is hedgerows of mulberry, and they are coppicing it for the leaves. And mulberry leaves are edible. They're 28% protein, which is extraordinarily high on protein content of the plants. and they have nut trees and different things integrated in. This is a no-till system. So as you get closer to a natural system, you start looking at perennial vegetables and non-tilling, things that look like a natural, more like a natural system. So forest gardens are essentially as close, hopefully, as we can get, and there's a large gray area in these too, as close as we can get to the natural system while maintaining, hopefully, some optimization of yield for human consumption. So what we have in these systems is perennial polycultures. A polyculture just means multiple species of plants in a given area. So these are perennial polycultures, which is something that exists in nature, and each one produces some sort of, it has a place in the system. It fills a need in the system. I can point some stuff out. Just this is a forest garden. This is 1 year old. This was down in the Keys. When they started this, zero soil. There was zero soil. The Keys is pretty much sitting on a bedrock. They brought in a bunch of mulch and planted into the mulch. So this one I pulled out of a picture online. It's a better example because I can see some stuff here pointed out and kind of talk about its needs. Comfrey is a nutrient accumulating plant. It's also a plant that they use to turn into a poultice and put on your skin for healing wounds and things. It's rosemary right here. That looks like, I don't know, maybe some sort of stone fruit or something, a peach or a plum, I'm not really sure. But you'll notice a lot of comfrey in here. Generally pollinator plants are going to be integrated into the system. All kinds of different edible plants that are yummy and stuff that feeds the edible plants. So I'm going to kind of go a little bit more into food forest because that's just one of my favorite parts about permaculture design is designing edible ecosystems because they taste good. Whenever people come over to my house and I show them around the garden that have never really heard of permaculture or don't know about plants and things like that, I'm like walking through the garden, they always give the example of, well, twice I've given the example of like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. It's like you walk through it, like everything's edible. It's like strawberries, things like that. Yeah, so there's layers to a food forest, and these are the same layers that exist in a natural system. They're obviously broken up for easy demonstration here. But if you just think through in your head of what exists in a natural system, you have the overstory of trees. And these have definitions that vary based on the author or the permaculturist or whoever wrote the book. But generally these are over 40 foot tall. And then next you have understory trees, which is usually the overstory in a Florida permaculture system because we don't have a lot of food producing 40, 50 foot tall trees. We just don't, unless, the acorns can be that, But yeah, so generally our overstory is going to be in what they would commonly call the understory. And that would be things like a persimmon tree that can get 20 to 30 feet tall. And orange trees probably somewhere in between, an overstory and the shrub layer. Shrub layer is more like blueberries, maybe like between here and here. None of these are cut and dry. It's just really tall plants, and then not quite so tall plants, and then smaller plants. And then when you get down, you have like herby plants that grow. These are like the Biden's alba and the comfrey and all the different summer lettuces that grow great here. The Okinawa spinach and the Suriname spinach, and all these different herby type things. Not to mention your standard herbs. And the fourth layer is that was the fourth layer. Where are we at here? It's like. Anyway, the next one is a ground cover layer. I guess it's number 6 on here. 5 looks like a root layer. I don't know why they're... Anyway. Yeah, so then you have the ground cover layer, which is like sweet potatoes that would be running along. In a natural forest, it would be probably Virginia creeper or, it depends on the forest and where you're at. But those are the things that grow low and cover the grounds. And then the second to last, I guess, layer is the root layer. You have your underground layer, which is much more important than I would originally thought, especially when designing polycultures, because you want to put plants next to each other that don't compete. So you might want to put a moringa, which has a nice long taproot, or an avocado, which has a nice long taproot, and you're going to want to surround that with plants that have shallow roots, so they don't compete. You want the system to work with itself. You don't have to know everything when you're putting it together. The plants will work that out. They will gladly die or move somewhere else if you put them in the wrong place, and they'll find their place. And the last layer is the vine layer. It grows up the trees. A lot of edible fruit-producing, edible leaf vines. You got the natives, passion fruit, grapes, chayote, Malabar spinach, a few different types of Malabar spinach. There's other ones. There's other ones too. So yeah, you have all these different layers, and you want to fill all of the niches in the system. Because if you don't, something else will. If you go to plant a food forest, and this is common, and this is something that I do too. You don't get all the layers filled in right away, because that's a lot of plants, and you can't fill every spot. It takes time for the plants to grow out and things. So if you just have a tree planted, every 15 feet apart, and then you have a shrub here and there, and you plant a little ground cover over here, and you leave the rest bare soil, well, something's going to find every single one of those other niches if you don't manage it. So the key is to try to fill the niches and reduce the need to manage the system. But while it's evolving, you do have to manage it. You have to pull weeds just like any other garden, and you have to chop stuff back, because things will outcompete other things too, until it gets established. There's no real predicting exactly how a system is going to evolve. There's for a long time people. You heard about the evolution of natural forest systems, like the slash vine forests. They have the pine trees come up, and then the shrubs come, or the palmettos come underneath them, and then the oak trees come up, and then the overstory comes, and but they're never just lateral like that. They can be largely unpredictable based on what thing fell in that spot and how quickly it spread and how much it outcompetes something else. You might have this huge area that's taken over by some plant that you planted and you didn't expect it. So it's a learning process, but it's an interactive garden. You're building an ecosystem. It's alive. So I had some notes on all the stuff I was going to say, and I just have no idea where I'm at this point. I can find it though. Okay, so one of the very important things, one of the things that we're doing with the natural system is building the soil so that the system can support itself. From gardening, we tend to think that we have to add, and the system's always taking and we're always giving, and we have to bring in from places, and that's true for certain things and certain reasons for that. But to give a quick explanation of soil development, you think about a mountain, and after the big shift of tectonic plates and they come together and the mountain forms, and it's a giant rock hill, and there's no soil on top of it. Well, the first thing that's going to start is fungus is going to grow on the rock, and lichen is going to grow on the rock, which is a bacteria that grows on the fungus. The fungus starts breaking down the rock and releasing minerals, and the bacteria, it fixes nitrogen from the atmosphere. It also takes in carbon from the atmosphere. All plants are made up of, I think, something like 40 to 60% carbon, depending on the plant. So most of a plant's mass is taken from the atmosphere, especially if it's a plant that happens to work with bacteria to convert nitrogen. So this biomass that comes from this lichen and this bacteria, or algae, I'm saying bacteria, but it's an algae that works with bacteria. And then it dies and it falls into a little crack, and that keeps happening. And this little crack gets some moisture buildup in it. And then a seed will fall in there, and a little nitrogen-fixing pioneer plant will come up, and then it'll die and mulch. And then after 100,000 years, plus a million probably, there's 2 or 3 feet of really rich, nice soil. Where did that soil come from? The system produced the soil. So we want to emulate this natural process of building soil over time. Florida used to be a sandbar. It's not much better now, but it's a lot better than that, you know. It's not great, but it's better. So one of the ways that we do this, and this is a common agricultural practice of using nitrogen-fixing plants to put nitrogen into the soil. Nitrogen is one of the 3 macronutrients that are used in agriculture. Nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, NPK, that's just the 3 numbers on the fertilizer. Those are the only ones we worry about, apparently, just those 3, you know. But, you know, it's the other ones that give you all that iron, that tomato, all the things that, you know, all this dead soil that we're growing all our food in and putting these 3 water-soluble nutrients in it to essentially make it the right size and substance and texture and form the mass of it, but it's not getting all the other little things that grow into the soil over time through natural processes because we're isolating, we're intervening into the system, and we're injecting into it pretty much what we need to, what we've chosen to. So conventional agriculture, between seasons, they'll plant a cover crop of nitrogen-fixing plants. Nitrogen-fixing plants have a relationship with bacteria in the soil, mycorrhizal bacteria, which just means that micro means small, rhizal means on the roots, so small bacteria that are on the roots. They go into the roots, they take nitrogen from the atmosphere. Plants can't convert nitrogen from the atmosphere into food. They just can't do it. They have to have a bacteria to help them out. They give the bacteria sugars, and the bacteria give them nitrogen. This is black medic. I took these pictures in my yard. These are the nodules on there where the bacteria live. They're really happy. They produce really pretty flowers. They seed themselves. So, but most of the mass of this plant is carbon from the atmosphere, nitrogen from the atmosphere. So this is free fertilizer. So we want to integrate, you know, in conventional agriculture, we integrate annual nitrogen fixers like peas and things like that. Then we till them back into the soil. But in permaculture or agroforestry or other systems where we're using perennial non-till systems, we have the added luxury of being able to use perennial nitrogen-fixing trees, which makes huge amounts